All right, people, you know that sound. It is the Unfiltered Band. It means, yes, another episode of Unfiltered commences right here and now. Officially, this will go down as episode 112 as we are in October Unfiltered live here. You can find us daily throughout the World Series and the conclusion of the season here in baseball 2022 at noon Eastern, all across social media. My Twitter at Casey Stern, Believes YouTube, my YouTube channel, which you can find in my Twitter bio. And as always, you should be buying over at the Believe shop, hopping on board with the merch, and however else you can jump on the Unfiltered Revolution. Get in my Twitter to find out more. Thank you, Unfiltered Band. And we have more. It's been a busy few days, and we've got another few still to go. Unbelievably, finally, because we've been doing this all week, we sit here with one more night before we get to the night, the World Series, the Astros and the Philadelphia Phillies. Segura and the Phils waiting so long that if you didn't see over on Twitter yesterday and Instagram, they had it out that Gene was sitting there and got on the plane. Instead of a suit, he was all suited up, actually, like in jersey attire, ready to get out there on the field, in the infield down in Houston, where they'll be at Minute Maid tomorrow night for game number 1 of the World Series between the Astros and the Phils. We've got such a great deal to cover here on this show today. Jeff Blum going to be with me in a few minutes. Also, Gibby will be here, the longtime manager of the Jays, John Gibbons. If you missed it, the last time he was on a week ago, when we found Gibby, he was in bed with his wife at his in-laws' place. So will he be in a sauna, a kitchen cooking? Who knows where? Hopefully it'll all be PG rated because it is a family show after all. And it is a show that is presented, as always, by our good friends at Bet Online. And we thank them for that. And we let you know that, once again, basketball is back. Bet Online remains your number one source for all your sports betting needs this season. You'll always get the latest odds, the team matchup info, player news, and game trends with Bet Online as your continued source for all your sports wagering information. Bet Online's got live betting, free contests, and giveaways all season long. It's always the fastest and easiest way to bet all your favorite sports and events, whether it's NFL, NBA, NHL, MMA, tennis, boxing, even golf. Get over to betonline.ag. That's betonline.ag and join and receive your 50% welcome bonus with your first deposit. However, you got to make sure to use this promo code. It's BELIEVE, BLEAV, to receive all of your rewards with BetOnline, where the game starts. As we get started, we'll do a lot of World Series preview today. Obviously, that's why we're here. But I want to hit a couple of other things we're going to get into. If you missed it, the report that Andy Martino of SNY had out yesterday about maybe some Yankee players, saying boo-hoo about the boos. We'll get into that. We'll also get a chance to talk about, because we keep all Sterns together regardless of the spelling, David Stearns. I'll get into that a little bit. Big news, obviously, one of the more highly regarded folks in any hierarchy in any front office in baseball, with the job that he's done with what little money they've had to play with in Milwaukee with the Brewers. We'll get a chance to chat and talk about what this means for him. Could he be possibly on his way to Queens to join the New York Mets and Steve Cohen, who certainly are looking for somebody in that kind of a position, with Sandy Alderson himself stepping down out of that element of the team, now just a part of it in a different manner. We're part of it with you a number of ways. As always, I tell you, you can join us on the chat live at any time. It's really simple. If you're watching us on Twitter, you'll see I'm even chatting with you along the way during the show, as I did just now. You could jump in, give your comments. Also could do so by just popping it open over on Believe's YouTube or my own, as we get a chance finally, now a day away, to say tomorrow the World Series will finally begin. What Super Bowl 4 hours? We've had 5 days to wait for this whole thing. And if you're not on the Astros or the Phillies side, it's kind of easy because we're covering it from afar. If you're sitting there and digging into it, it's even more difficult to try and get sleep and wait and wait and wait. As the great late Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers said, the waiting is the hardest part. So why not bring him in here as we get Blummer on board to start us off? And Jeff, obviously, first of all, we talked so much about layoffs, right? And you and I got into discussing that a little bit in the conversation about that at the beginning of this postseason. Both teams dealing with this, but what's the most difficult part for the players right now on both sides, going through all these days of waiting as if it is a Super Bowl kind of a wait before the World Series?
So the Astros have actually had the opportunity to address that, having that second round or that first round by playing in the second round of the division series. And I'm sure they explored some options, take some live swings. And all of that is good and great. But at the same time, trying to control the adrenaline is a little bit easier in practice than it is during a World Series appearance here tomorrow. But at the same time, I always feel it's more difficult for hitters to create the timing and create the intensity and control that heartbeat at the plate, because you're not pumping maybe 2-3 miles an hour harder than he normally does. And pitchers, I think, have a little bit of an advantage. It's much like coming out of spring training where they have the opportunity to make sure they're pitching and then they're ready to go and start to go, after these hitters in those games. But I'm more curious to see how it affects the Philadelphia Phillies, because the Astros have prepared for a series, and the Phillies actually blew into the playoffs, with the clinching the second game before the end of the season. But they've cool-off period. I wonder how that affects their offense that has been going so good.
Yeah, and we talk about it. And I was talking about this yesterday I had Matt Holliday on and was talking about his run in 2007, which kind of is reminiscent a little bit in this for people who don't remember that, and just to kind of bring it back up because it is the Rockies and it's a while ago. But, they win 20. They did better than the Phillies down the stretch. He touched home plate. They win 21-22. They amazing job.
He's touched home plate, by the way. I was there for game 163.
It is already as they say. All that matters is what they. Yeah, right. We go back and fix that. But you know how it is. I mean, look, that team specifically, and I was around them at the time with MLB.com like every day, and I saw, they went through that round. They were underdogs against the Phillies at that time, who were a year on the precipice before they had that whole obviously run that they made, and they knocked them off. Then Brandon Webb and the Diamondbacks, and they break. And then there's that adrenaline dump. Everything we've been doing, every game 7 we've been playing, Blumber's gone, right? Now we're all the way back to game 1. Every game's felt like a game 7 for them. You talk about, simulating at bats and all those sorts of things. We always discuss, and this thing I love from players, like slowing the game down. And what is that? How much harder is it when it's slowed down for you? I mean, in some ways, is it good that it's sped up the way it gets in a postseason?
Yeah, I would actually. Some aren't, but the Philadelphia Phillies, running into the Braves, who had that layoff, the Padres running into the Dodgers, who had that layoff, and they both took advantage of Seattle, who were coming in with momentum. And I think that's, when you're moving at that pace and you're comfortable in that environment, in that arena, constantly on the road or even at home in front of your crowd, where the expectation level is so high, but at the same time, your eyes are ready, your mind is ready, your certain rhythm to a baseball life, and that's what these guys thrive on, especially hitters. When you try and develop the timing, you try and develop the rhythm, get the hands in the right place to fire, pick the ball. And then all of a sudden, like you said, you do hit the brakes, and you kind of have that opportunity to take that breath. Sometimes you just want to keep running as fast as you can instead of taking that break. And now you got to ramp things back up, and not just ramp things up. You're going into a hostile environment in Minute Maid Park on the biggest stage on the planet in baseball. You're the only 2 teams left.
Now, that environment, I don't want to upset Astros fans who obviously, you're part of the team for a while as a player and covering it a long time. I don't expect them, where I'm going, because that park didn't affect you in game 3 going back in 2005. So you've been on the other side, and I want to hit a lot of Astros up, but let me first go there and take the other side of it. What do you remember about that AB and just kind of that moment? Was it slower at the time than you thought it would be? Did it happen so fast that you have to almost kind of watch highlights after that, Blumber, to kind of figure out what goes on in that 14th inning? For those of us who have never stepped in that spot and watched these home runs like Harper just hit, what do you remember all this time later now about that AB, which ended up helping Astros fans cover your ears, really put them away in that series?
it was an interesting time, and I actually, I had a bat I had in the World Series, so it was a lot of preparation in between. It was a lot of cage time, but I remember coming in. I came in a double switch in the previous inning for Toddy potential, or he was the World Series MVP that season. Paul Konerko was having a great World Series. So in my preparation, when I was standing in the hole behind Jermaine Diamond in my only big league, World Series appearance, so there was a little bit of trepidation and panic in my heart because I'm as easy as bunting sounds. It's not that easy. About as fast as a tortoise getting from first to second. So I was like, man, I got to lay down a perfect bunt to move this guy. And love Pete hitting on deck going, yep, this is going to happen. And the Astros actually made a pretty good turn on Paul Konerko in a double play to Morgan Ensberg to Vizcaíno and over to first base. As oddly as it sounds, washed over me because I said, oh, dear God, I get to swing the bat instead of trying to lay down a bunt. And I knew Ezekiel Estadrigo had a very good book on how to pitch me. So I stepped in and I told myself I'm going to take until I get a strike. First pitch ball, a little more relaxed. Pitch ball 2. And I said, okay, 2 sinkers well off the outside corner. They're going to try and stay away. And all of a sudden, my brain kind of settled down and I was able to step out, think about it, go and drive me in. So my idea was actually to see the ball as long as I could, let it travel, go the other way, not try and do too much. So I was really relaxed that I was in a good hitter's field, misses his spot by a good foot and a half, and I just reacted. That down and in spot for me as a left-handed hitter was my happy zone, and I was able to come through my head.
Matchups, and that was one obviously, you're preparing for, but you don't know. And even in the at-bat, as you broke down, right, it switches. When we get ready for a series like this, as I kind of turn the page to what we're looking forward to tomorrow, I think about matchups, and I want to get into a couple of them that I think are just huge in this series. And to me, it's I'm calling the Alva matchup. It's Alvarado Alvarez, because Yordan is not a guy who's a normal lefty against lefties. And then it's David Robertson because of how good he is against lefties, being that other guy who I think is going to see a lot of Yordan Alvarez, because there's only going to be so much of the game. You may have a 6th inning and an 8th inning, let's say, and you never know. Rob Thompson, the way he manages, and I love it, he's aggressive, maybe backwards. He may go to Alvarado thinking the at-bat in the 6th is the biggest one, and then it's Robertson in the 9th who ends up having that AB. How about those guys against Alvarez and just how huge that is, Bummer, here, this matchup in this World Series?
Well, I think you bring up an interesting point in Alvarado, because you have Alvarado and Dominguez, 2 of their best relievers in that bullpen. They've been fantastic throughout the postseason, and that he can. If it's later in the game, it's later in the game. But if you have Yordan Alvarez at the plate in that 6th inning with a runner on or a couple of runners on, and the situation, like you're saying, is it going to be in the 6th? Is it going to be in the 8th or 9th? How do you use those guys? And I think that it depends on the score of the game. Obviously, maintain the integrity of that game and give your team an opportunity to come back later. But I agree with you. That's the one matchup between those 2 guys that you're going to have to key on, because that for Yordan Alvarez, and the way, and even going back to the bottom part of the order, the way Chas McCormick and Martin Maldonado have done a good job of getting on base, is what that's done is also for Alvarez to do damage. And I think those guys at the bottom part of the order, if they can continue to get on base and frustrate pitchers and force traffic with Alvarez on base, you're going to see Alvarado create something later if they don't come through.
On the other side, we're talking Jeff Blum. On the other side, The Astros are so deep. The funny part about them, we talked about this a week ago, and I was saying this to Mike Stan a couple of days ago. I don't remember ever, even in the years that he had with the Yankees back in like the late 90s, where their bullpen would have like 8 guys. As I said to him, Ramiro Mendoza would be in there for garbage time, and he could have pitched an 8th inning somewhere else. I mean, that's how good they were and so deep. But the Astros may be the deepest staff in the 20 years I'm covering this game that I remember being in a postseason. They got answers, Jeff, to everything. Bryce Harper, though, has answers to everyone, right? I mean, he's just a different beast. And unlike Aaron Judge, who, look, had a historic season, Aaron Judge didn't come into that series on a heater, as you would say, right? To use my guy B.A. and Brian Anderson, right? He didn't. Bryce Harper coming in, hitting everything. That's an MVP who's playing now and walking in. Layoff maybe hurts, but like an MVP. Is the attack any different with Harper versus anyone else the Astros have faced in terms of, I'm going to do this differently to not let that guy beat me? How much of that do you think plays a factor into the thinking of Dusty and the staff?
I think it impacts it a great deal. Will Smith, the left-handed pitcher out of the bullpen, hasn't been on the roster for the first 2 series. And the reason for that is because the Seattle Mariners, handers in that bullpen and in the rotation other than Framber Valdez. And then you get to the New York Yankees, like you're talking about, a high swing and miss, high power, high slug with the matchup of right on right, where you're going to run into the issue. And I think that's where this series is going to get very interesting, is the Kyle Schwarber at bats and the Bryce Harper at bats. Obviously, are going to compete. They've been doing it all season long. But what, like you said, what do you do when you do get into the latter part of the game? Those starters are out, and Dusty and Josh Miller, where those innings are that you bring in certain guys to face a Bryce Harper, because he, much like Alvarez for the Houston Astros, is a damage guy. If you have guys on base, got Ryan Stanek, who has reverse splits. He has an elevated fastball in the upper 90s, and then you have a changeup. So I would imagine that, if Will Smith's not on there, it's a Ryan Stanek. He's got one of the best changeups coming out of that bullpen for Dusty Baker, and he's been fantastic in high leverage situations. So I think those 2 guys, before you get to Ryan, speed pitch that can offset some left-handed hitting. And how about the fact, getting to the closer, Ryan Presley, it was about maybe his last 4 or 5 appearances, all of a sudden, the power slider, the fastball, he's actually instituted a change up. And it kind of makes you wonder, is that a pitch that he would be able to utilize against a Schwarber or a Bryce Harper late in the game?
Yeah, I think, Blubber, there's 2 things here that I also, because knowing Dusty, both know him well. I mean, here's a guy who, 2 things with Dusty. One, I know, because I remember talking to him during the years, he knows how good Bryce is. He saw it firsthand. He had him, right? And that's going to play. I mean, people think like, oh, well, it doesn't matter because like he knows how great Aaron Judge is, but it does, especially for a guy like Dusty. It does, because he knows what that dude can do, and he knows him in here. He knows him in here. He was there before those at-bat. He's not going to be afraid, but he's going to be more careful with Harper than he was with Judge, and people might think that sounds crazy, but there's a difference there. And here's where I'm curious to see how this pans out. You and I both know, and I could go back to, Greinke on the mound and Maldonado, telling Dusty he's good and leaving him in that postseason a couple of years ago. Dusty is a guy who's a feel guy. He's not an analytics-driven guy. He's going to leave pitchers in there. Valdez, after everything happened with the PFP that went wrong, in the middle of last series, goes 6-7 anyway, right? But what about a third time through? I know it's not a Dusty thing; it's a league thing. But when you got Verlander and Framber Valdez third time through, and Harper is sitting there, and Dusty knows Bryce, knows the adjustments, knows what he looks like at the plate, probably can manage his body language as an opponent better than anybody else because he's seen it. I can't wait to see, does he adjust, and maybe where normally he'd leave a guy in, because of Bryce, maybe make a change to give him a different look, even with a Verlander or a Valdez in a 6th, 7th inning.
Yeah, I actually enjoy this conversation because Dusty is a little bit of that old school where he will let his starters extend them, leave them out there as long as he could. And then you also have Lance McCullers in that clinching game in New York where he was getting roughed up, didn't have his A-plus stuff, but he rode him out as long as he possibly could. The starting pitcher a little bit, but at the same time, like you said, this is the beauty of going through a regular season where analytics can help you out in the long run. But when you're playing these short, brief series, all savvy or intuition, and Dusty does has a ton of insight into his own guys, but he also has a little bit of insight into what makes Bryce Harper tick a little bit. And there's a real veterans, managers like a Rob Thompson, who's on the other side also, who's embracing some of the numbers. But then you have Dusty on the other side, who just realizes that he's got a pretty healthy guys to go out there and prove themselves, give them the W. But I'm kind of curious to see how it works out too. I don't think you can anticipate what Dusty's going to be able to do because Dusty's got his own thoughts in his mind.
And you're right. And his feel of Bryce is different. That's why it's going to be fun to watch, because normally it's the feel of your own team, but he kind of gets it there. Last one, and I'll let you run. Wheeler and Nola are both, when they're on, nasty, right? Now, the Astros have faced great pitching before. They've faced great pitching in World Series before, when you think of the Altuves and the Bregmans, and they faced it last year. What was your take on Nola getting the game one start and that flip, if you will, to kind of get Nola back out there? Would have had the longer layoff, and to put Wheeler in game two. I know the Astros hitters don't care who they face, but what's your take from the other side, kind of seeing that switch from Rob Thompson?
I think if you were able to evaluate each pitcher individually, I think Nola is a movement guy. He does have velocity in the lower to mid 90s, and if you go back to his last start of the regular season, it was against the Astros, and I think he went 6 2/3 perfect game in Minute Maid Park. So there's a little bit of a feel there saying, okay, he had excellent movement on his pitches and he kept them off balance. And I think that's where you might move him up a little bit and try and rely on his movement, because sometimes fatigue can make that ball actually move, locate that pitch on the outside corner like he was in that last start against the Astros in the regular season. It's going to make it very, very tough, because what that sinker does is it splits the plate and then the outside with that slow breaking ball. So it creates kind of a matchup issue with all the right-handed hitters in that lineup. And then you give the extra day rest to a guy like Zach Wheeler, who's a hot. So you want that arm fresh, you want it juiced, you want it ready to go to be able to go out there. But I think the Astros are going to use these couple of days to go to school a little bit, see what it's a little bit closer in their memory where that release point is and how that ball comes out of the hand of Nola, maybe to help them pick it up a little bit sooner. But I would expect the Astros to be, they may work themselves some walks and try and frustrate those guys and get them out of the game with a high pitch count and try and get into that bullpen early against the Phillies. I think that would be the best attack plan for them.
Blummer, I appreciate you, man. Enjoy this. I know it's going to be a lot of fun. It's going to be a kind of insane and crazy environment in both places. And look, I mean, Philly, it's new. They haven't been there in a while, so getting a lot of credit, but I know how it is. And keep the roof closed. Forget about, whether the balls fly out. It's just a better environment there. It's noisier and crazier, which I think is better for the home team. Enjoy it, buddy. Appreciate this, and thanks for hopping on again.
No, keep working hard.
Thank you, Jeff. Appreciate it.
Glad to be on with you, man.
Thank you, buddy. I appreciate you. There he is, Jeff Blum, joining us here on the show. John Gibbons will be with me in a few. I want to hit something on Nola Wheeler that everybody who's watching better think about. That is not why they do this, but it is something that could be advantageous or something that becomes a big story in game one, and you hear it here a day before, all right? Watch the way Rob Thompson has managed. He's an aggressive manager who sat in game 3 of the last series, managing like, I don't care what happens in game 4. I don't even know who the hell could throw in game 4. I got Alvarado, I got Dominguez, I got them in there. I don't even know who's closing this game. Ended up being Eflin, right? Because I'm going to throw all my horses. And in game 4, he didn't have Zach Wheeler at the time. He go in a bullpen game with Falter. And by the way, he faltered. They still, even though he gave 4 runs, came back. But I want you to think about this. And I'm not saying this is why they did it. The Phillies are trying to win a series. I think they're pretty sure they're not going to sweep the Houston Astros the way they've played, the way Houston's played. Got to win one and then take it back to Philadelphia, right? Got to get one of the two. Having Nola start first allows you to manage the bullpen with all the, because this is not this guy's the 6th inning guy, that guy's the 7th inning guy, that guy's the 8th inning guy, and this guy goes in the 9th. It's not how this bullpen works. A lot of times in postseasons, it's successful teams, that is. Not here. Not how it works for Rob Thompson, these Phillies. But now you can do that in game 1. Why? Because I got Wheeler in game 2. I got a Wheeler who had extra rest, even an additional day. I got Wheeler who had 86 pitches. We know it was dealing and could have easily continued on the last time that we saw him in a game, right? In game 5 of that last series, but did not. He's got a well-rested arm, hasn't been taxed, even now more rested. And I know the way that guy has dealt and the way he pitches, that even if it gives up too early somehow on a 2-run home run when with a boop or a blast, that I know Wheeler can go 7 innings for me and get through it. But I know this about Aaron Nola. So do Phillies fans. So does Rob Thompson. So does that staff. That he's either going to be on or he's not. And if he's not, then I can go early. If I can get in a 2-2 game with Verlander in a 4th, 5th inning, I can go even there in a spot where Alvarez is coming up, put Alvarado in, give him 5-6. Go 7-8 Dominguez, try and get Eflin to close to go steal a game. But if it doesn't work, I got Zach Wheeler in game 2. Now, if I use Wheeler in game 1, and I'm not saying this is why they did this, but this is advantageous and something to watch in how game 1 is managed for certain. All right? The aggressive nature, if you go with Wheeler, and for some reason he doesn't have it, or he can only give you 5, and he gives up 3, and he walks 3, and it's just not there. Well, now what the hell you do? Because if you go aggressive, you now are thinking to yourselves, well, I got to get out of here with a win before I get back to Philly. I got no chance to win the series, right? That's the way you look at it. It's the way it is. It's the way you look at the series beforehand. I got to get this game. I got to get a game before I go home. Well, Wheeler doesn't have it. What the hell am I going to do? Because I don't know what Nola could not have it tomorrow. I can't go to Suarez, not in this kind of series. I need him game 3. I can't do those kind of things against this team. But having Nola in game 1 allows you to literally blow out your whole bullpen if necessary, and then hand Wheeler the ball and say, you're going 7. Even if you give up 3 runs, you only threw 86 pitches in a game. You were brilliant. The last 2-3 starts, you've been unhittable. I expect that from you, and you should, the way you've seen Wheeler pitch. And then we'll figure it out. I got 3 outs from a guy, even if I got to go Alvarez for 2 outs and 4 to Dominguez, or however you get the last 6 outs, right? But I can get there, and Wheeler can get me in a spot where I can get a lead, and maybe it's not even a save situation because I got Wheeler. Everything's circling back to that. Well, in game 1 with Nola, now Rob Thompson can manage that game so much more aggressively in game 1, and you're going to see that than he would if Wheeler starts. Now, clearly, 2 things are a non-issue or make it such. 1, Nola gives up 5 runs in the first. Nobody can. You got to obviously going elsewhere, right? Nola's up 5-0 after 6-7 scoreless. You don't need it. But the ability is there now for Rob Thompson to come in, have those answers, and to be uber aggressive in that spot in game 1 because it's going to be Nola in game 1 and Wheeler in game 2. And that's something to watch in how that game is managed in that bullpen in game 1 and game 2 of this series, because we've talked about this ad nauseum, and it is the biggest factor in this series. All the momentum, the top flight pitching at the front end, Bryce Harper, what Schwarber's doing. I mean, look, there's a lot of things to love about what Philly's given you, right? But the difference in the depth of the pitching staffs between the two is way bigger than any 19 wins in a regular season nobody cares about anymore. It's way bigger than a layoff that's about even. It's a big difference in the depth of those pitching staffs, and that's something now that I think you get to be more aggressive with, and I'll ask about that, the managing and much, much more, to a guy who the last time we saw him was in his bed, and now I feel like we went to the office. I guess we're back from the in-laws as our guy Gibby is with us, John Gibbons. Gibby, what happened? You went home?
Yeah, but hey, I've been like on a whirlwind tour. Don't ask me what I've been doing, but yeah, it's like, hey,
Well,
when
you
you're in
can't say
baseball
that.
your
If
whole
you
life,
say don't ask me what I've been if you say don't ask me what I've been doing, that's like telling kids in a horror movie don't go down the stairs or don't go in the basement. So so now I got to ask you what have you been doing?
Well, you know how the baseball life is, right? That you know what, you're always on the move, so I wouldn't know what to do if I stayed in one place too long.
Well,
Right?
that's true. That's true. That's true. It's good to have you. You welcome back home.
Yeah.
And how was the in-laws? Was it fun, good time, tolerable?
Yeah,
What?
great
Whatever.
time. Yeah,
Okay,
good.
great time.
Yeah, good people. My wife. Yeah,
Good.
and but
Good.
plus you got to make the wife happy. You know how that works.
Yes, yes, I didn't do that successfully. That's why I'm not married. But I understand how that goes. Look. I
Well,
want
hey,
to.
I'm divorced. This is my second marriage. I found me a sweetheart, but yeah, so
Okay, there you go. There's hope for me after all. I want to ask you a number of things as we get into this series, and we're talking to our guy John Gibbons. Let me start here, and that is that I was just talking about this. Nola's going game one, and Wheeler's going to get game two. And watching Rob Thompson manage in the last series, he was so aggressive. Like in game three of that last series, Gibby, he's going to Alvarado in the sixth, in the seventh, and Dominguez. He didn't even know who'd close. I got to get that game, right? That urgency. How much now more can he manage that way with Wheeler as that game two guy? I think about when Andy Pettitte used to pitch all those game twos for the Yankees when they were so good. And you would just know you can kind of blow out that pen, do whatever, because that's the dude that's going to get you 7 innings, and you don't got to worry about the bullpen. As a manager, how are you managing maybe a little differently with Nola now starting game one in terms of using your bullpen, knowing that Wheeler is sitting behind him in game two?
Well, I think what you're always aware of. I can only example I can give you like when Roy Halladay was pitching, right? It wasn't postseason games with us, but you knew he was pitching. Let's say tomorrow night, so he's going to probably give you 7 unless something crazy out of the ordinary happens. So that this particular night today, we can do whatever we want, right? And that's in you can do that. You got to win 4 games. You got to be careful early. I mean, you got a couple games to play with. I mean, everybody might not agree with that, but you have to. You can't burn everything up right away. And I think Tom's probably, that you got to close out that game there, so don't let them back in this thing. That kind of mentality, and those guys are hot too. He can almost throw anybody out there he wants, and it's going pretty good. So it's a totally different game now, and it's managed differently. There's no doubt. And a lot of guys will start burning through their top guys earlier. Because if they don't, they're taking a lot of heat for it, where that never would have happened in the past. But back in the old days, starters pitch longer, and everybody's surprised when you took those guys out,
Yeah, I was going to ask you about this as a member of the fraternity. How good does it feel? And I wonder, I mean, do you think of it this way? Am I making too much of this? That you see a guy like Rob Thompson, here's a lifer, a baseball, rat, X's and O's, but feel of players and feel of people, right? Which is most important. And the moments. Dusty Baker, same thing. Brian Snitker, who's here a year ago, same thing. Buck Showalter, I know the Mets didn't get to the end, but same thing. And I could go on down the line. Bob Melvin, right? Even though he should have had Hader, and I'm not happy, and I love Bo Mel, but same kind of thing. How does it feel in the world? And I know that everything changes, right? We're not playing Atari anymore. But in a world where analytics have kind of taken over and people have forgotten human element, how good does it feel as a manager to see some of the guys who are more of the feel guys and the baseball rat guys that are now managing these two teams in Dusty and Rob Thompson?
Well, it tells me is what they fit in. They're not dinosaurs now, and what they've always done, it has value, right? And it worked. It worked for a long time. It's kind of interesting. I was you brought up Tom's. I was listening. I heard something today, and he was talking about how one of the biggest when he took over, he didn't make a whole lot of changes, but one thing he did when he took over Girardi is he kind of stabilized the lineup. Right, they were juggling guys here and there, and people will look at that. People outside will go, "What's the big deal? It doesn't matter where anybody hits." I said, "No, that's wrong, because it's a psychological thing. Maybe it shouldn't matter, but it does. These guys want stability. So now that there's analytics not going to tell you that, because I had many times, and I had some some star players that were a little vulnerable. If you juggle the lineup, they're pulling their hair out. They're going,
"That's right.
What are you doing?" And they're blaming you. So it's a different animal, and most people don't quite understand all that. Numbers are great. Numbers don't lie, but numbers have always been part of the game and always will be. But there's another side of it right here. Because what do we say all the time? What's the difference between a great player and an average player? Right here, right?
Oh, of course. And humans make Gibby, humans make the numbers. Humans are the ones, and their performance give us the numbers. And I'll give you an example, a guy you managed against, that is always the biggest example for me, for people who remember, and I'm not talking about the Red Sox version, but the Tampa Bay Rays version of Carl Crawford. Here's a guy he was maybe the fastest person in the league when he's running the bases. He didn't hit leadoff. He hit second. And every time he hit leadoff, it didn't work. And every time they kept putting him back there, it didn't work. For whatever reason, that guy saw himself in 2 in the lineup. It's the same way as the reason why you get coffee where you get it, or what socks you wear before an interview. I always say this, like, baseball players are not that different. They're just human. You're all just human beings, just like we are. We all got our routines of different things. Well, why'd you go this way, even though this way is shorter? Well, I feel more comfortable because I like driving through this neighborhood, whatever the hell it might be. It's the same way. The other part of it is, though, how good these two guys are, Gibby, at talking to their players and learning. Because Tom's had to get in there, and look, Dusty, same thing. I mean, he's got a lot of young players. Everybody talks about, the old Astro teams with the garbage cans, but outside of Altuve and Bregman, it's a lot of new guys. I mean, McCormick and Tucker and Pena, these are guys Dusty has had to kind of lead with and groom. But they're having conversations with humans, learning about what makes them tick. And I'll give you a line from a guy we know well. Leo Mazzoni told me, I did probably 20 years ago on the air, which I thought was great. He said that coaching to him was knowing where to blow smoke and where to light fire. And I thought it's one of the greatest lines.
Yes.
That's managing, isn't it?
Yes. Your number one job is manage. Your GM puts a team together, right? Your job is to get the most out of these guys, whatever that takes. And because they hire them, whether it's analytics or what, they sign this guy because he does these numbers. He should do this he's been doing it every year. Well, if he also you give him a big contract, he may lose that edge. He may, feel more pressure. He's not that same guy. So we go, oh, everybody was, what happened? Okay. Well, here's the human element side. The manager's job is to, whatever he's got to do, blow smoke or light fires to get him to where everybody thought he would be when they signed the guy for a lot of money. But that's forgotten a lot in the game now. These guys, if these guys were robots and you could guarantee a particular outcome, it'd be easy, right? Another perfect example. You brought up Tampa Bay. When the Dodgers beat them in the World Series, right?
I remember. Blake Snell, of course.
Right?
Yes.
Okay. And I said to somebody, I don't ever question anybody because I know how easy that is to do and all that. But if you make that move years ago, you're in the World Series, you get fired. Right?
Oh, and you probably before the game's over in the office, you just don't know it yet.
And nowadays, though, if you don't make that move, you get fired, whether it works or not.
Well, also in that organization, as you know, that's kind of like, this is how we do things. And that's part of the problem is, like, I trust my guys and this is how we do it. And all that's great. But then there's that feel and that urgency that you have to learn. I talk about this all the time, and I love Doc. We allow players to learn, but we don't allow managers. I remember being there, Dave Roberts, the first time he's in a World Series. In a Game 7, Yu Darvish gave up 5 runs before Kershaw came in and threw 4 scoreless innings. And I know he'd like that back and would love to have pulled it, right? Because now normally it's Yu Darvish, but you can't. But he never managed that way again in a World Series, right? Buck Showalter was sitting there putting Ubaldo Jimenez in against the Jays instead of Zach Britton, but then he's got Diaz in a 7th inning. When he's right, guys adjust and learn. Right. Managers are allowed to do the same thing. We've also seen players do the same thing, and I'm curious for you, watching Bryce Harper in his career, a guy who to me had the LeBron James Gibby thing really in social media era. He's one of the only other guys who's lived LeBron's kind of life where you're 17, 18 and people getting on him for blowing kisses after home runs or whatever it was down in the minor leagues. And Cole Hamels hits him and tells him to know his role. I didn't even know him. I mean, it was ridiculous, right? First time he hits him. What's it been like watching, and what's impressed you most about now this Cooperstown path that Bryce is on?
Well, you could tell from day one, the first time I saw him, he confident, overflowing with confidence, right? He knew he was good. And he rubbed a lot of people the wrong way, obviously. And there's a lot of envy there, obviously, right? But then, if you turn around and you produce when it counts, and they, the Phillies go and sign him for that huge contract, right? They want production, and of course he wins the MVP last year. And then this year he gets, the big home run, everything he's doing right now. That's what they paid for, and a lot of guys, it's not easy to step up and give them back what they paid for, right? but he's one of those guys who can do it because that's his mentality. It's like LeBron, the same type thing. You're not gonna crush him. He's not gonna lose his confidence. The same way with Harper. It's a different game, obviously.
And you got to be arrogant to be this good. That's
Yeah.
right. I mean, Chipper Jones said something to me a number of years ago. I did a town hall with him down here in Atlanta in Decatur, and he said something to me that really I always remembered. That his father told him. And I can't remember. Maybe it was before he got drafted, but about the importance of, to be successful, skating the line between arrogance and confidence. But you have to have some of both. People don't realize that. It's like, the late Kobe Bryant. It's like Mamba mentality. It's success mentality.
Real.
If you don't think you're great at what you do, you're not going to do it well. Right?
Yeah,
I know it's not that complicated, is it not? Right?
No, and everybody's wired differently. But I can remember when I was playing, and then now since I got into coaching, the thing that stood out to me, the great players, it's like they don't give a damn, right? They could care less, right? That's not true. They do, but if they fail or they strike out with the bases loaded one time, or they make an error or something, costly error, it doesn't destroy them. They know, well, I'm going to get another shot at it and I'm going to come through. That's their mentality. With the lesser guy, it's, he can't let it go. It's eating at him. The fans are on him. He's hearing every one of them, So it's a mentality. Maybe there's actually something they're wired differently, but you got to be confident in what you're doing, and because we've seen many a player when they start to lose it, let's say, you see him kind of shrink a little bit, right? Well, like they can't do it. And there's certain guys, Jose Bautista's a perfect guy. You couldn't tell him. Good luck trying to tell him he can't do something, right? And he believed that, whether he was right or wrong. He actually believed that he wasn't fake kidding himself. But there's something different about the great players,
And that's how he went from a guy who everybody else believed was a utility player to becoming what he became. I just don't believe he should have. You don't mess with Odor is the only lesson that.
How many times have you ever seen that in baseball?
No, that never. It's the only time I've ever seen that.
So you think when he came up from that slide, do you think he expected that?
No, of course not, because it's crazy. No, I get that. Of course not. Of course not. I mean, look, this as well as I do. Most of the scrums, guys are pulling their own shirts out of the way, so you don't want to fight each other. So no,
exactly.
Nobody expected that. The great John Gibbons is joining us. I know you had, and I think you had AA on recently, right, on your show, Alex Anthopoulos.
Yes, two-parter, man. The other part's coming up this Monday.
He's done such an amazing job with the Braves and is building that kind of Hall of Fame arc as a guy who, managed teams. Dave Dombrowski been around for so long. You played against a number of teams that he's been a part of. Is he getting enough credit? I feel like, I know he's only there a couple of years, but I feel like he's not getting enough credit. It can't be an accident that you show up in the places in Miami and in Boston and Philly, everywhere he goes, and teams get to where they get to. In your mind, is he getting enough credit for just how much impact in a short time he's had on this Phillies team to get them here?
No way he's getting as much credit as he deserves, and he's one of the good guys too,
and great hair. Great hair. Way better hair than we have. Great hair.
I think he dresses better too, man.
Oh, he got great hair. He's not messing around. Go ahead.
So yeah, you know what? All you got to do is look at the track record. It speaks for itself, right? It's like Anthopoulos is doing, but Dombrowski's been doing it everywhere he goes, right? Something good happens, and maybe he doesn't fit that modern day mode of what they consider GMs, right? Maybe he's not as analytical, so they think, well, he can't be successful. No, he gets it. He understands. He gets it all. Now he's worked for some good organizations that have some resources, but it doesn't matter. He's got that touch. He hires good people. All those things. And it's kind of funny. It was in New York. He'd been let go by the Red Sox, and I'd been let go with the Blue Jays. I was at a Broadway play. I went up there to see my son. And I look over and there's Dombrowski sitting down at the end of the room. Go, he kind of went. I don't really know him, but we're both out of work. He actually went back to work. I never did. But I thought, so we think alike. We like Broadway.
Well, first of all, you're getting time after managing as long as you did in the game. You're getting time to actually breathe and smile and do stuff because it's a thankless look. You're field goal kickers. I mean, that's the way it is. I mean, you're expected to. You miss an extra point. It's the only thing anybody pays attention to. When you do it in New York, it's magnified. You know this. You played in New York. I mean, you managed against teams in New York forever. You know what that's like. You know what that cauldron is like. I know how much you love JD, and I said, I don't think he wants to change his name to Bringer of Booze. But, Josh was getting crushed there in that series. I know he didn't play well. He's harder on himself than anybody. You and I both know that. Right. Much more than I do, but I know that as well. How much you feeling for him, how tough that had to be for him in that spot to be 36 and be Josh Donaldson, the MVP who was who he was, still defensively terrific, but just know that he's not catching up to the ball the way he used to. He's swinging and missing at balls in the dirt that he used to laugh at and spit on and have that mean stare that we're all used to. How difficult do you think that had to be for him, a guy who knows him real well, obviously, in Donaldson?
Oh, it was eating him alive more than anybody, But if there's one guy that can handle it, and sure, yeah, it's they get these reputations and this he's finished up his career in this town and it's tough and they'll look at him however they'll judge him in the end, but mentally he's not going to shrink. He had a rough series. A lot of guys had the rough series, and he is getting older. There's no question about that. And but that's part of it. I think that I thought it was a great move when they picked him up because he's going to add a little toughness to him, and I think he did wonders in a lot of areas for him. Yeah, he's not the MVP guy, but you're not supposed to be, right? When you start getting a little bit older like that, but this won't crush him. I think he has another year on his contract left there. He's a fighter, man. You know what? He's not going to back down. And I guarantee he probably is mumbling under his breath at a few of those fans on the way back to.
Oh, I'm sure you have to be. And here's the thing. And I wanted to bring this up to you, and I'll because I'll let you know and everybody else who didn't see the report yesterday because I wanted to get your thoughts on this and I'll let you run and I want to hit more on it. But so Andy Martino of SNY had a report out yesterday. Now look, let me start with, as a member of the media, I don't know who the sources are. It's a report. Doesn't mean it definitely happened. Who the hell knows, right? But you look at it, okay. So he had this report out yesterday that said that more than one Yankee player told their agent last week that playing at the stadium, quote, was an unusually brutal experience during the series against the Astros. It was hard for many teammates to believe that they booed Judge, that was stupid, by the way. I mean, look, Yankee fans and my whole family, Yankee fans, except me. And if I heard that any of them booed Aaron Judge, I'd yell at them too. I mean, it's just stupid. I mean, you got to be kidding me. People were upset and sympathetic to what Josh Donaldson went to. A longtime executive said, I get that it's a World Series or bust, but damn, they've become spoiled. You played in New York. You understand New York. You manage against New York. You can't be weak in New York. I don't know that this happened. It's hard. It's always amazing how when people say this, right? And these things don't come out of nowhere, but people don't say who said it because those people are too afraid, right? So their feelings are hurt, the players, whoever it is. And I know it's not Josh who would do this, but whoever it is upset. Like, how the hell could they boo us, right? But they're not going to say that to the paper, which would at least to me show me, okay, you want to talk some crap, talk it to the fan base and say it. They're going to tell someone who then tells a reporter, and then it looks even worse. Having played in New York, and understanding those areas, Philly the same way, right, in this sport, Boston the same way, just how different of a mentality, Gibby, do you have to succeed as a baseball player in New York if you're playing for the Yankees or the Mets?
Oh, it's totally different. And now I didn't get on the field much, but I can remember early on when I did, I couldn't believe it. Remember the movie? I was growing up and saw Escape from New York.
Oh yeah, of course.
This is real. And, I mean, it's like, are you kidding me? I was from a young kid from Texas. I was 21. I thought, this is totally different. And they were ragging. I figured they're supposed to cheer their team, right? Anyway, so, and you see guys all the time where they, certain guys have no trade clauses in their contract when they sign,
and they don't want to go there. That's right.
Yeah, New York's always on one of them, So I guess it could be worse. You could be playing for the Knicks, where the
Knicks are 3-1. I'm a Knicks fan. Don't give me crap. The Knicks are 3-1. All right.
They do it there all year, don't they?
All right, it's a family show. Don't give me shit about the Knicks right now. They're 3-1. All right, so I got 4 games in. I'm enjoying life right now. But you know where I'm at. It's like because here's the thing. Just to give you an example, right? So Chris Bassett, who's a terrific pitcher, and a guy who pitched in. A lot of times, what happens, because look, this happened to CeCe, to Carl Crawford. He goes from Tampa Bay, goes to Boston. It looked like he forgot how to play. I remember him dropping pop flies. I mean, all these, right? This is not easy. Carlos Beltran, Kansas City, the first year with the Mets, couldn't figure it out. Edwin Diaz, Seattle, first year with the Mets, couldn't figure it out. It takes time. Lindor, right? Cleveland, how many examples? We got Tino Martinez when he came in to fill in for Mattingly. Didi Gregorius had a terrific career following Jeter, right? These things are hard. But Bassett said something before his start that they showed during the game in Game 3 where he failed in the postseason. And I said, I admit it, and look, he seems like a nice guy. I said he's a free agent. I said he's gone because his comment was, playing in New York is as hard as people said it was, and I'm proud of myself for getting through it. And I'm like, you can't, to succeed in New York, you got to embrace it. You got to think it's crazy, but love it. You got to want it in your, like Starling Marte, watching him, he'll play in New York the rest of his career if he wants. So you got to have it in your veins to be able to handle that. How much can you tell from players as a manager in big moments, in big cities, in big games that you manage or are part of, the guys that can and the guys that can't? Not by their performance, Gibby, or at the plate, but how much can you tell just in kind of seeing them and understanding them as people? Which guys?
There's no difference. You know after learning about some guy, being around him, this guy's going to thrive under pressure. This guy won't. I was a guy that didn't thrive under pressure too well, obviously. So I could probably sympathize. I could pick those guys up.
I don't think that's accurate. I mean, you weren't, you're not a Hall of Fame. By the way, the 0.001% of the people of the world that make Major League Baseball, right? So hey, let's be fair. Let's give you. I got it.
But I guarantee you, I told you when I first went there, I wouldn't have minded being out there in Seattle, man. We could relax a little bit more. Where you can get away from the game. New York and Boston, you can't get away from the game. Even LA's a mega media place. It's totally different, right? And if you can't embrace that, or you're not part of that, it's like growing up. My favorite team, the Yankees, with the Thurman Munson, the Pinella. Well, they'd fight you, right? Those guys were
tough.
Perfect for that. Yeah,
tough.
I had Donaldson on. I said, yeah, that's what Yankee fans want. They want those kind of people. They want the guys. They don't want the guys going down there fashion week.
You can't. I remember specifically, and a guy, but I remember Nick Swisher when he played there. There was a time where he got upset and said, now he did say publicly that he was mad that the fans were booing. And after that, I know fans, like friends of mine are from there, who literally they checked out on him after that. They want people in New York and Rhys Hoskins, Philly fans, he'll be a hero forever because they screamed at him. He couldn't play first base. He couldn't hit. He was a bust after home runs. He sat there, took it all, played every day for all these years, and just hit five. That dude, he's going to get a statue if they go to win a World Series because that's what they're building you, right? It's like they want to drag you by the shirt and say, can you handle it and stick it out? To your point, guys like Donaldson, look, whether, at 37 next year on performance-wise, who knows, but he's not going to be afraid of it. And certainly, Aaron Judge, it's what makes him so special that he, with all the cauldron on him, not afraid of it. But Gibby, you can't be a Yankee and telling me you're afraid to get booed. I mean, you're off the. I'm honestly, if I find out that I'm the GM, if you're managing the team, you're Booney. I'm wanting to find out which players sent that because that guy can't be on this team. You can't play here if you're afraid of getting booed.
Oh yeah, it's part of it. It's almost like a compliment. They boo you, it's a compliment because they'll turn around, they'll cheer you when you do something good. I can remember one other quick funny story, Casey. When I first got there, I was scared to death. I'm going. I was out there shagging balls, and this is at Shea Stadium at our home team, right? I hear some little kid out of the corner of my eye just ragging, cussing me out big time. Going, so I turn over there, and this little kid and his old man standing next to him, look at this big old grin on his face like that. I'm going.
We're not in Texas anymore.
No, but we ain't Texas, but they don't want Texas flexing their muscle on them either.
Oh no! Hey, country strong, and I know how that goes. All right, let me ask you the last one and get out. How do you see this thing? Philly's got the momentum ride. Said this the other day. Great thing about the World Series every year, Gibby. Both teams are telling the story, and it's a true story of nobody could beat us. Everything's gone right. All the momentum, even though it's been different. The difference in the depth of the pitching clearly to Houston. The difference in the teams during the year heavily towards Houston. That didn't matter last year. The Braves won anyway. How much of a shot you give Philly in this thing?
Gosh, it's they are. I mean, they're on a roll. They got that emotion going. They're on top of the world. They last team to qualify, right? So Who knows what might happen? But we say they're the hottest team. Well, Houston hadn't lost a game yet, have they? In this postseason?
No, they haven't lost yet. No.
Exactly. And they got, you know what? They got some new players on the team, but they got the experience too. They were just there last year. It's a toss up because I think, Philly's so confident right now. If they were just going in and just kind of, they snuck in somehow, things went their way, I think Houston would roll them. But I don't think that. And they're a very balanced team. Other than I agree with you. I think Houston, you give the edge to with the pitching staff. So it should be a good one. It should be a really good one.
Give me on the way out here. I know the first AA part is already came out. I saw that. When's the second part coming out of your spot with it?
Monday.
With Alex Anthopoulos?
It's coming Monday.
Monday. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
AA gets so long-winded.
Oh, dude, well, come on, GMs. I mean, the problem is he's too smart. These guys you got to talk to stupid people like me. It'll be a lot easier.
or he just keeps talking, so I don't get a chance to talk, and people don't. So he gets. I don't have to ask
as long as you're dressed and not in a bed, I think you're off to a good start.
Ain't no telling what I'll be next week or whenever.
Hey, the sauna. Hey, I hope the series goes long enough because now I'll bug you again. I appreciate you, buddy. You know that. Enjoyed it. Always do. Chatting with you. We'll catch up soon. Thank you, bro. Be well.
See you, bud.
There he is, John Gibbons, good a dude as there is in the game, and as good a manager too, certainly. And look, you think about this sport. If growing up in New York, you can be terrible, and I mean at anything. Like you could suck, you can't be weak. You cannot be weak. When I saw this article yesterday, and again, and I know Andy Martino well. I don't think he's making this up out of nowhere. I don't know who the sources were, but I know this much. There's a reason the people who are afraid of getting booed are then too afraid to put their names next to it, go tell an agent to go tell on the fans and go tattle that they're not being handled well enough. You're playing for the Yankees. Do you know who the hell you're playing for? That's not even like the Mets. You're playing for the Dallas Cowboys, the Montreal Canadiens, the Toronto Maple Leafs, the Lakers, the Celtics, the Yankees. That's it. That's who you're playing for. I don't want to hear Cubs, Cardinals, Mets, Red Sox. That's it. That's the whole list. That's who you're playing for. In a postseason, where, mind you, you're looking at, where you're FaceTiming Poppy for, moral support, which is another thing. And I love you, Boone. But when I saw that piece, and if you go look at this report, that a horribly brutal time. First of all, you didn't hit and you got swept. That's why it should be a horribly brutal time. Now, booing Aaron Judge is dumb, but I watched them boo Derek Jeter. That was dumb. How do you boo Derek Jeter? Remember when he opened a season? Was he 0 for 32 or something like that? I mean, really? He can go 0 for 332. You can't boo Derek Jeter. But people are stupid. It's not New York. That's just stupid people everywhere. It's the million times that I've brought up things like this. Like, for example, Kenley Jansen, where after he won a World Series with the Dodgers, the first time the fans are back in the building, he walked the guy in the first ninth inning. He pitched and they're booing him. That's dumb. That's just stupid. People who are, Russell Wilson now, geez. But Russell Wilson, when he first came back to Seattle, my God, you can at least appreciate what the guy did for 5 seconds. And then you see one of the commercials, and I get it. Subway, my God, I can't even eat Subway anymore. You can't be in a spot where you play for the New York Yankees and you are complaining about how you are treated. You are getting paid most likely better than you would anywhere else. You are getting treated, I know from players I've talked to about how different it is, that they've heard all this stuff about go to the Yankees, you get treated first class. You're basically guarded by Secret Service with that PR. Everything about how you are treated is first class. And you're at Yankee Stadium and you got pinstripes on. I'm a Met guy telling you that. That's the way it is. You can't sit there and complain. If you complain and you show weakness, you already beat yourself. You lost already. You can't be on the team anymore. To play in that city for that team specifically, even much more so than the Mets, if you can't hack it mentally, you can't do it physically and perform either. Now, you don't got to be crazy. You can be mild-mannered like a Bernie Williams was or like an Aaron Judge is, and you're just You're caring about your own performance and you're hard on yourself and you're doing all those successful things, and that noise ain't going to get to you. You could be like Roger Clemens was or other guys were and Jorge Posada and Paul O'Neill, and you could be feisty and fiery, and you could get at it that way too. But you can't be weak. It's like in Glengarry Glen Ross. The leads are weak. You're weak. The fans are weak. You're weak. You cannot play in New York if you are weak. Fact. End of story, exclamation point, sorry. So I don't know about who the sources were, who the players were, but I know this. If I'm Brian Cashman, if I'm Cash or Boone, if I'm Brian Cashman or Brian Boone, I want the list. I want to find out who they were. They're off the team. You can't be that guy in that city on that team and succeed. Now, you could fail anyway. You could suck. You can't be weak. You cannot be weak. You don't give effort or you're afraid and you're gone. Why do you think the Ben Simmons story became what the Ben Simmons story is in Philadelphia now? Not because he couldn't shoot, not because he didn't dunk when Trae Young was defending him in that one spot in a game, in a moment. It's because he looked weak, and you can't be weak. Just the way it is. Doesn't make it right, doesn't make it easy, but if it's not for you, it's not for you. As they say in Glengarry Glen Ross, in that same monologue from Alec Baldwin, if you want a friend, go buy a dog. Fans aren't always going to be your friend in those kind of cities. That's it. You can't handle it. It's a wrap. We're a wrap here. And I get to say this. Tomorrow, the World Series gets underway. Let me say that again. Tomorrow, the World Series finally gets underway. Alex Cora, AC, will be with me. Knows the Stros better than anybody. A longtime friend of mine, manager of the Red Sox, will be on board. Anthony Recker will be here. We'll talk about just some of the many different pitching matchups and some of the things from behind the plate that these catchers are going to be looking for, and two of the real good ones, and three if you include Vasquez, Real Muto, and Maldonado, in terms of pitch sequencing and calling a game, and really probably the most unheralded and underrated, but most integral and most important part of these games, and that is those matchups and winning those one-on-one matchups like the ones that we will see between Alvarado and Robertson or Dominguez, or depending upon whom and when, against a guy like Yordan Alvarez. You can always find us. You know when. It's noon Eastern Time live. Believe YouTube, my YouTube channel, which you can find in the bio at Casey Stern on Twitter, or on Twitter as well. Thank you to all the folks who were part of this. You can always join and get all the episodes on Apple, Spotify, everywhere you get your podcasts, including yesterday with Matt Holliday, Todd Frazier, Jason Stark, conversations like the ones I've had with Dusty Baker, among many others from around the league. We've even done hockey. We got plenty of basketball, and also 9 parts of a Life Pod series, because I think it's very important to continue to focus and pay attention to humans and mental health as well. We always pay attention to the people who make this possible, and we thank the folks at BetOnline, because we, as always, on October Unfiltered and Unfiltered, are presented by BetOnline.